Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Thank you so much for stopping in this evening. I really appreciate it. It has been it has been a busy day in the news, hasn't it? Um, we have so much to cover. All the latest stuff on the Epstein files, other things. It is busy, busy, busy. Which is always tons of fun. We also have a whole variety of stories. Epstein. I've got a story here about climate change. The UN Security Council might have a police ban for Gaza, as just by the Trump administration. All great things happening. But first of all, I want to let everybody know that make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, CameronJournal.com/subscribe, or you can head right over to Substack, CameronJournal.substack.com, and subscribe there and get the newsletter delivered right to your inbox, which also gets you access to this show delivered, The Living Joke, interviews, everything, all to your inbox comes every Saturday. I I do want to shout out, not really shout out, but remember in kind memory, a dear friend of mine who passed last week, William Griffin Sandifer. I never don't really ever think I talked about him, so even OG people who watch the show won't know who he is. But he was very prominent in the tattoo and outlaw community. He owned a very popular page on Facebook called Inked Sexy. And for those of us who traveled in those circles, people actually don't know I know this. I used to own a tattoo shop for a long time, and uh, I met him through that world, and we were friends for a long time. And unfortunately, I found out on Friday night that he passed Wednesday last. So there was a memorial for him in the newsletter on Saturday, which actually this week came out Sunday because my schedule got thrown off as deaths in the world tend to do. And it's and I eulogized him, which was a very odd thing to do. He and I were the same age. But made very different decisions in life. We had a very difficult relationship. We actually had not spoken for quite a little bit. And yeah, so it's been interesting. It's been it's been fascinating. It's the last couple days have been a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of interesting phone calls, a lot of late nights and early mornings. But I wanted to mention him. So yeah, but that's what comes in the newsletter every Saturday when I get it out on time. I also want to thank our Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. If you want to support my journalism, my work, all this type of thing, the fastest way is to subscribe. Now you can do that in two locations. You can go to CameronJournal.com/subscribe and subscribe there, or you can go to CameronJournal.substack.com and subscribe there. Both are great. All the money comes to me anyway. Also, if you look in the last newsletter, I also take coffee tips. So if you just want to drop me a tip, $5 for doing this type of work, you're welcome to do that. As well. Yeah. So that's all kind of the housekeeping stuff. Social media is at CameronJournal.com, but you can always find me either at Cameron Cowan, which is like Twitter, Instagram, or at Cameron Journal on TikTok, and keep up with me. Latest news stuff, all this type of thing is happening. So without further ado, let's turn to the headlines. Let's do this. And then let's get rid of that. We'll need these back on Wednesday when the guys are here. But right now, we're going to talk about climate change. Before we get into the hot and heavy stuff, this story is more fun. This is from Earth.com, and it says here that scientists claim, I should put on my glasses before I try to read. Scientists claim it's already too late to save the luxury crops that make coffee, chocolate, and wine. Coffee, chocolate, and wine, three luxury crops that millions rely on daily, are increasingly at risk from climate change. From smallholder farms in Ghana to vineyards in France, rising temperatures and shifting rainfall patterns threaten both harvests and livelihoods. Even with new ideas to cool the planet, scientists warn that these crops may not be saved. A new study reports that a proposed cooling method did not reliably protect them, with only 6 of 18 major regions showing improvement. A Colorado State University CSU team tested key areas in Western Europe, Northern South America, and West Africa using large climate models and crop suitability metrics. The goal of the study was to determine if stratospheric aerosol injection could help mitigate climate change and stabilize growing conditions for grape, coffee, and cacao crops. Using data from the past 2 decades, the scientists simulated what the future climate might look like in luxury crop regions between the years 2036 and 2045. Plants grown primarily for their high market value rather than for basic human needs are called luxury crops. They include things like coffee, cocoa, tea, vanilla, saffron, and truffles. Farmers cultivate these crops because people around the world are willing to pay premium prices for the unique flavors, aromas, or rarity. For example, saffron costs thousands of dollars per kilogram because each thread must be hand-picked from a flower. And then it says here the CSU team tested a proposed method called stratospheric aerosol injection. Involves spreading reflective particles high in the atmosphere to lower surface temperatures. The strategy has been evaluated in a National Academy's report. Rain and humidity shift with warming in complicated ways that can undermine farm stability, a pattern assessed in an IPCC chapter study. Temperatures may fall under solar cooling, yet water risks can still swing wildly across seasons and regions. Cooling the sun's energy does not steer storms or guarantee gentle rains. Researchers caution that solar cooling redistributes heat and moisture rather than targeting specific farm needs, and that mismatch matters to growers and buyers alike. And it says here that lower temperatures help reduce heat stress in some vineyards, yet vineyards also need a defined winter rest. So too much warmth can increase early bud break and raise frost risk. A viticulture review notes that warmer springs lead to earlier bud break, increasing exposure to damaging frosts. That dynamic explains why a warmer world can still suffer costly cold spring snaps. So the long story long is adaptations may vary by crop and place. Growers can shift varieties, change canopy management, improve drainage, adjust harvest timing, or invest in shade and wind protection. Some risks are easier to manage than others. Irrigation can relieve a dry spell where water is available, and on-farm water storage helps, while few tools can prevent a week of soaking rains that drive disease. In short, climate change isn't just changing the weather, it's rewriting the geography and ultimate survival of luxury crops and agriculture around the world. I thought it was interesting that this they keep talking about these changes and all this type of thing, and this is another sort of entry into that narrative about how that even when you even if we were to mitigate it with like reflective sort of thing, it's not necessarily going to solve the problem or create the type of stability that allows these things to thrive. I think one of the things people forget is that climate does change over time, and sometimes crops that are viable in one area become not in another. And this happens from time to time. Kill the Anasazi. And I think this is another iteration of that, which I think is rather interesting. Um, so it's one of the things that my new people text me all the time. Sometimes I put my phone on do not disturb when I'm recording, but anyway. So yeah, it was an interesting study, and also shout out to Colorado State University. That's near where I went to school in Fort Collins, Colorado. So, but the idea of kind of is stratospheric aerosol injection, trying to say, yeah, I don't know that that's gonna necessarily work so well, but. Yeah, this was interesting, and I thought it was a nice way to get us started because we have a whole lot more complicated stuff as we go along. So, let's dive into our first really serious story. And this just came across the wire this evening. In major breakthrough, UN Security Council adopts U.S. peace plan for Gaza. Now, a lot of people, let's just preload what the narrative on this is going to be. Okay, so this is the US led President Trump 20-point ceasefire plan for Gaza that involves, it says here, an international stabilization force to enter, demilitarize, and govern Gaza. It also envisions a board of peace to oversee the peace plan, although not how the board should be composed. And it also Russia and China abstained to allow it to go through. Let's just say it right now, the right is going to claim this is a huge win for Trump. That's going to be the narrative, all this type of thing. And that's, I mean, regardless of anything, that's fair. This is probably the first big thing that's happened in the UN Security Council on this for a while. I think it's interesting that it involves an international stabilization force. And And I think it also is interesting that it has the backing of a lot of Arab and Muslim nations, including Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, as well as Indonesia, Turkey, and Pakistan. Um, it says here that Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, who addressed the council before the vote, called Gaza, quote, hell on earth, unquote, and held up a copy of the resolution describing it as a lifeline. After the vote, Mr. Waltz thanked the council for joining us in charting a new course for Israelis, Palestinians, and all people in the region alike. Security Council resolutions are considered legally binding international law, and although the Council does not have a mechanism for enforcing such resolutions, it can take measures to punish violators with penalties such as sanctions. In a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump wrote, congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me, and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. Well, we know one person is going to be on the Board of Peace. He thanked various countries, including Russia and China, and said the vote will lead to further peace all over the world. Still, the path forward is plagued by many uncertainties, with Israeli strikes continuing in Gaza and outbreaks of violence erupting in the West Bank. Among the next steps would be naming members of the Board of Peace, the body in charge of overseeing the transition in Gaza, and clarifying under whose authority the stabilization forces would operate. The resolution says that if the Palestinian Authority, which partly governs the West Bank, undergoes reforms and redevelopment of the shattered Gaza Strip advances, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Algeria's ambassador to the United Nations, Amar Benjama, the only Arab member of the council who was negotiating on behalf of the United Nations Arab Group, thanked Mr. Trump for his personal engagement in bringing the conflict in Gaza to the end, but said the aspirations of Palestinians for a state should not be overlooked. Genuine peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without justice for the Palestinian people, who have waited for decades for the creation of their independent state. Many council members, including France, Guyana, Pakistan, Slovenia, and Somalia, had issues with the fact that the resolution did not include clear language on Palestinian statehood, but they said they had endorsed the proposal to support the political momentum, prevent the resurgence of violence, and allow much-needed humanitarian aid to flow into the enclave. They reiterated that the territorial integrity of Gaza must remain intact, and that lasting peace must be rooted in a two-state solution. The language in the resolution about Palestinian statehood had drawn objections from Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stating on Sunday that our opposition to a Palestinian state in any territory has not changed. And this is where I say the narrative is going to be huge breakthrough. Trump brings peace to the Middle East, and that's going to be the sticky point. The Arab world's going to want a Palestinian state. Israel does not. With a stabilization force and demilitarization of Gaza, how that takes shape is going to be very complicated, because it could absolutely include, clearing out everybody there, anyone who's not been bombed to death, and going on, from there. So when it comes to the Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East, it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, sort of thing. And it says it also authorizes, the resolution allows the World Bank, a UN entity, to allocate financial resources for the reconstruction of Gaza, and calls for the establishment of a dedicated trust fund for this purpose. It authorizes the Board of Peace to oversee Gaza at least until the end of 2027, and says the enclave would be managed day to day by a technocratic, apolitical committee of competent Palestinians from the Strip. The stabilization force would also coordinate with Egypt and Israel to train and support Palestinian police personnel, protect civilians, work to ensure humanitarian aid corridors, and secure border areas. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that it's essential now to translate the diplomatic moment into concrete and urgently needed steps on the ground. I'm not going to say this isn't progress, because it is, but you're still going to run into the issue of where are the Palestinians going to go? And how, what is the future going to look like? And that's where you're already going to have pushback, because it says at one point late last week, objections by China and Russia, which typically coordinate their positions around resolutions by the United States, threatened to derail the resolution altogether. Russia drafted its own 10-point counter-resolution on Gaza, which called outright for Palestinian statehood and said the Israeli-occupied West Bank and Gaza should be joined as a state under the Palestinian Authority. After the vote, Russia and China said they had abstained from the vote because the resolution lacked clarity on key components and that the United States had not responded to multiple demands to provide more details on the Board of Peace and a two-state solution, and that Palestinian self-determination for post-war governance of the enclave was not fully reflected. This ain't over. This is nice progress, and the narrative will be that this is that good guy Trump finally brings everybody to heel. And that's not incorrect. It's not. It is important. But there's still a lot of details and things to figure out. What's going to really make this stick is if there's follow through. If there's meaningful follow through and something people can believe in, that's going to make for a very different conversation than another vote or another solution that doesn't go anywhere. But this is big news on the international desk. So yeah, but narratively speaking, it's going to be hailed as a big thing, and obviously, as always, the truth is always a little bit more nuanced. This story came out last week. I was going to write about it in the newsletter and just kind of ran out of steam. Um, Last week we had the first AI orchestrated cyber espionage campaign using code directly from Claude. And this is the Anthropic press release about it. And it says here, we recently argued that an inflection point had been reached in cybersecurity, a point at which AI models have become genuinely useful for cybersecurity operations, both for good and for ill. This was based on systemic evaluation showing cyber capabilities doubling in 6 months. We'd also been tracking real-world cyber attacks, observing how malicious actors were using AI capabilities. While we predicted these capabilities would continue to evolve, what has stood out to us is how quickly they've done so at scale. In mid-September 2025, oh, that's why I can't get rid of it. It's an eyelash. There was a hair on my glass. I couldn't get rid of it. It's an eyelash. In mid-September 2025, we detected suspicious activity that later investigation determined to be a highly sophisticated espionage campaign. The attackers used AI's agentic capabilities to an unprecedented degree, using AI not just as an advisor, but to execute the cyber attacks themselves. The threat actor, whom we assess with high confidence was a Chinese state-sponsored group, manipulated our Claude Code tool into attempting infiltration to roughly 30 global targets and succeeded in a small number of cases. The operation targeted large tech companies, financial institutions, chemical manufacturing companies, and government agencies. We believe this is the first documented case of a large-scale cyber attack executed without substantial human intervention. Upon detecting this activity, we immediately launched an investigation to understand its scope and nature. Over the following 10 days, as we mapped the severity and focus on the operation, we banned accounts as they were identified, notified affected entities as appropriate, and coordinated with authorities as we gathered actionable intelligence. This campaign has substantial implications for cybersecurity in the age of AI agents, systems that can run autonomously for long periods of time and complete complex tasks largely independent of human intervention. Agents are valuable for everyday work and productivity, but in the wrong hands, they can substantially increase the viability of large scale cyber attacks. And it goes through some of the technical stuff, which we're not going to get into at this juncture, um, and how they picked the targets and all this sort of thing. But here's kind of the real punchline is this raises an important question. If AI models can be misused for cyber attacks at this scale, why continue to develop and release them? The answer is that the variabilities that allow Claude to be used in these attacks also make it crucial for cyber defense. When sophisticated cyber attacks inevitably occur, our goal is for Claude, into which we built strong safeguards, to assist cybersecurity professionals to detect, disrupt, and prepare for future versions of the attack. Indeed, our threat intelligence team used Claude extensively in analyzing the enormous amounts of data generated during this very investigation. A fundamental change has occurred in cybersecurity. We advise security teams to experiment with applying AI for defense in areas like security operations center automation, threat detection, vulnerability assessment, and incident response. We also advise developers to continue to invest in safeguards across their AI platforms to prevent adversarial misuse. The techniques described above all will doubtless be used by many more attackers, which makes industry threat sharing, improved detection methods, and stronger safety controls all the more critical. I think I can take off my headphones because we're not going to watch any videos this week, which is good. Um, so this is something that everyone was very much afraid of happening, and that we all kind of figured and thought would happen at some point, and what were we going to do when that day arrived. And that day has now arrived. And it's an interesting it's an interesting sort of problem, because not only did it come from China, not only did it involve Claude Code, not only is it, I mean, you look here of the finding and how they did it in phase 2, 3, 4, and 5, and how all of this was supposed to have worked, that they found out is the life cycle of cyber attacks showing move from human-led targeting to AI-driven attacks using various tools, and how this kind of moved through. Um, I this is definitely a new stage in cybersecurity. I remember in all the people, for kind of OG people of the show, a couple years ago, we kind of really got into cybersecurity for a bit, and I interviewed a bunch of cybersecurity experts, and it's like, how do we solve this? What's the solution? What do we need to do? All this type of thing. And it was, I did not feel good about some of the solutions. I didn't necessarily feel great about their attitude on this. And now with AI being able to do this on its own, basically, um it's a very frightening place. We're in a very, very frightening place. The fact that this isn't bigger news, I think, is probably the part that concerns me the most. um and the fact that people are, this isn't kind of really ringing the alarm loud to be like, hey, someone just did a cyber attack and they didn't really have to do anything. They just kind of set the AI out there and it did stuff. And we're finding out about it 2 months later after the investigation. This is the first one, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be the last one. We have a long we're going to be living with this for a long time. And I wish the story were a bit bigger, because this is absolutely an existential threat to anyone who has to do with cybersecurity, which these days is essentially everyone. And when you look into different cybersecurity attacks and all this type of thing, you end up with, all, systems being taken over, people having to pay out ransom, all this type of thing. When you've lowered the barrier to entry to do this by a great deal, and you can do it without even, really having to put in a lot of effort, what real cybersecurity do we have? And the fact that we don't have necessarily more from Anthropic on, how to prevent this, defend against it, all this type of thing, is a bit, worrying. It says here that in the final phase, the attacker side cloud produced comprehensive documentation of the attack, creating helpful files of the stolen credentials and systems they analyzed, which would assist the framework in planning the next stage of the threat actor's cyber operations. Overall, the threat actor was able to use AI to perform 80 to 90% of the campaign, with human intervention required only sporadically, perhaps 4 to 6 critical decision points per hacking campaign. The sheer amount of work performed by the AI would have taken vast amounts of time for a human team. At the peak of its attack, the AI made thousands of requests, often multiple per second, an attack speed that would have been for human hackers simply impossible to match. Claude didn't always work perfectly. It occasionally hallucinated credentials or claimed to have extracted secret information that was in fact publicly available. This remains an obstacle to fully autonomous cyber attacks. Well, I guess that's comforting. But yeah, this was kind of what the AI world was a Twitter with over the weekend. I saw some videos about it, all this sort of thing. This is huge news. And this is gonna get worse. As someone who's followed the AI space, and I read someone said this along the way, he said, anytime you see a video about an image or a video created by AI, that's the worst it will ever be. Anytime you see a robot, that's the worst that robot will ever be. This is the slowest, least threatening cyber attack we'll ever see using AI. And yeah, we shall be a lot more concerned about that. Anyway, moving right along. Um, I saw this morning from Thinking About by Timothy Schneider here on Substack, and it was titled The Grift Bubble. And I'm kind of like, this could be interesting. So, kind of shifting away from international and AI, we're now kind of getting back more on the domestic front. It says here, how does a country burst? To answer this question, it helps to see matters as do the president and vice president from inside a grift bubble. As I traveled around the United States these last weeks, Columbus, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, DC, Boston, Chicago, I tried to explain that I worry more about the disintegration of the United States than about regime change in which Donald Trump exercises autocratic power from coast to coast. The effort to create authoritarianism is more likely to lead to a breakup of the state than a total regime change. This end of the United States is possible in part because our president and vice president think that it is impossible. Because they are inside a grift bubble, they push for authoritarianism inside in their own interest, without reckoning with the possibility that their actions can wreck the country. For them, America is a limitless passive resource. Your perspective is probably different than theirs. To help us understand this risk, it helps to try to see the whole world from inside a grift bubble. Imagine that you were a first rate grifter, the President of the United States, say. Your grift is that you pretend to be a successful businessman and use that supposed expertise to make your case for the presidency, which office you then use to make money. Or imagine instead that you are the vice president. Your grift is to claim that you understand poor people, whose problems you say are the fault of gays, immigrants, and billionaires, and then you rise to power thanks to the money and support of a gay immigrant billionaire. Given that these are their shticks and that they have worked, you can see how Trump and Vance might conclude that Americans are gullible and all things are possible. The initial claim, the wild lie, is like the air that gets the balloon started. Trump is a rich person. Vance cares about poor people. The big lies work. And then there's more lying, more hot air, a growing space, a sense of comfort, a safe space for fascist oligarchy. You grift on and you grift on, and the bubble just gets bigger. It seems like you know everything that you need to know, and that the grift, the graft, and the gruffity gruff can go on forever. When you've lived for a long time inside a grift bubble, you think you've seen it all. But this is not the case. From inside a grift bubble, you do not see the outside. You do not grasp that your grift actually depends on something larger, something better, which it is sapping, weakening, and bringing to ruin. You have fooled the world, and so you think you understand it. Indeed, as a grifter, you become contemptuous of how other people make their living and live their lives, and yet your knowledge is actually limited. You know things that outside of the grift bubble do not know, but they also know things that you do not know. You can take away what belongs to people without knowing how they achieved it or attained it. The guy who cheats the farmer at the county fair does not know how to farm. The guy who profits from curated crypto scams does not understand the world economy. Trump and Vance imagine, because it has worked thus far, that they can grift endlessly. They do not understand their grift depends upon what I will unashamedly call the honest labor and decent convictions of millions of Americans. Were there not Americans who actually worked and cared and tried to live right, there would be nothing and no one to grift. In an instructive article that he wrote in 1990, the American novelist David Foster Wallace said that cynicism is a form of naivete. When you dismiss everything, you feel like you can do anything, but then you don't believe in some things that are real, like love or law or patriotism. For you, such things are just tools of the trade, manipulable handles, just the way to enlarge the grift. That they have some other sense, that they are the building blocks of some other reality that you do not see, and in that way you are naive. Trump and Vance are indeed naive in the precise way that corresponds to their cynicism. They think that the United States will continue to exist for their sake no matter what they do. From inside the grift bubble, they see only grift and think they see the whole country. As the bubble grows bigger, they confuse their own profit with the well being of the whole. The fact that Trump and Vance do not believe in real things such as love and law and patriotism makes them strong in one way, it makes them weak in another. They cannot foresee larger consequences because they do not understand how the world works or how a country is constructed. And as they break things, their naivete prevents them from seeing what is happening, and indeed forces them to snarl harder. I suspect that this is why, in some social media thing somewhere, the vice president lashed out at me on this very point. And so here we are. The bigger the grift bubble grows, the less healthy material remains beyond it. It sucks away what is productive. As personal connections become the basis of business, the economy slows. It sucks away what is ethical. As corruption comes to seem normal, citizens lose trust in one another. As basic institutions are scorned and destroyed, people cease to believe in the law. The material which builds a nation, moral, institutional, economic, starts to give way. I am worried about the disintegration of the public for other reasons, of course. And then it says here, Trump also seems to be contemplating a war against Venezuela or whomever to distract attention from his activities inside the grift bubble. But any land war, which is what it would take to generate such a distraction, will be difficult and unpredictable. He and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth are unfathomably ignorant about modern warfare. Such a move could lead to not just a lot of pointless death, but also unpredictable chaos. It says the president and the vice president do not know the history of people like themselves or that of other republics that were needlessly brought down by men of their particular sort. They think the magic of words will always save them, that there will always be a next grift, that no crisis is so great that it cannot be turned to personal profit. This is true right up until the moment when it is not. The republic can break, but it need not. Those who work against the grifters who reinforce the reality beyond the bubble are doing right. They are not only holding back authoritarianism, but giving the republic a chance. They may be acting from love or from law because they know that these things are real, and so they should also know, in acting thus, that they are the patriots. And I enjoyed this idea of patriotism, one, because, as I've said for a long time, I resent the fact that the right wing has made patriotism politically right coded. And one of the things I loved about the Kamala Harris campaign is they really embraced the American flag, patriotism, rah rah America aesthetic that Trump had perfected. Now, part of that for Democrats, because there's a lot of Democrats who are not a huge fan of this country, and I'm kind of one of them. Sort of thing. And so the whole rah rah patriotic America first thing is not necessarily always a selling point on the left, but the Kamala Harris campaign deployed it very, very well. And they started to kind of reclaim that from the right. And I think, being patriotic for a country that is functioning, that has low levels of corruption, that has high levels of trust, that has institutions, that doesn't rely just on personal connections for opportunities, but relies on a certain amount of meritocracy, credentials, and having an open ability for anyone to find opportunity is a very vital and important thing. And I think a lot of people do not realize what they've lost until they don't have it. And unfortunately, we are drifting into a place, as he mentioned in the article, where we're losing those things. And the thing I love about this is it always seems like around Trump, politics and reality seem to warp, and curve in different and odd ways that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. The rules don't seem to apply to him. He seems to get away with so many things, people will say. And the thing I really loved about this, and I haven't read this person's writing extensively, but the thing I loved about this was that he kind of explains why things warp in the presence of Trump and that things don't seem to work the same way. The rules don't seem to apply even for other politicians, this sort of thing. And I thought that was an interesting sort of thing. And I think even when we're talking about, because we're the news narrative show, when we're talking about news narratives, when you start to understand their perspective on it versus the way we're looking at it from the outside, even if you're a Trump supporter, understanding that they have very limited, very imperfect information, and they're on the look for a check, starts to help us really understand the headlines. And this is going to be important because we're going to get into Epstein here in a second. And so I just love the fact that I'm like, oh yeah, it is a bubble, and reality warps around it because the both of them are on the make for a check. And so when you understand their motivation, it's kind of like, well, yeah. And also Trump's very, very good at convincing people of things. And it's funny because I have a bit about how MAGA, it might be dead or whatever have you. And I wrote about this a little bit on the newsletter, but we're going to get back into it as soon as we get through Epstein. I love this because it lays the groundwork for other things that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And it was just so helpful. It really clarified my thinking for me. And I think that's incredibly helpful for us all. So definitely go give him a follow, snyder.substack.com. Give him a follow because it's good. Now, let's walk through the present Epstein situation. So, oh no, that's H-1Bs and okay, yeah. So let's walk through the Epstein situation. So I've been following Aaron Parnas, the Parnas perspective. I am only mildly resentful he's more popular than I am, but that's okay. He also, I think, puts out like 8 videos a day. So that's a different story. In any case, so a lot has happened in the last 3 or 4 days. So let's start with what happened on Friday. Trump demands DOJ reopen Epstein investigation to target Democrats and avoid Republicans. Trump has ordered the DOJ to investigate Democrats and institutions connected to Epstein, telling them to avoid investigating Republicans as he tries to shift blame from his own connections. Donald Trump is now directing the Department of Justice to reopen the federal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein to target prominent Democrats and institutions. Trump's demand arrives despite the fact his own Justice Department and the FBI previously concluded that they found no credible evidence linking other individuals to Epstein's crimes, and that he desperately wants the public to stop talking about his own links to Epstein. This White House is in panic mode, and now more than ever we need to hold their feet to fire to get to the truth. Trump wants to distract the American public away from his own associations, and I will not let that happen. It says here, Donald Trump has frequently referred to the broader Epstein case as a hoax, even though his administration oversaw an extensive internal review. That review examined investigative files, video footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence. It resulted in a written memo that found no proof of a secret client list and no verified information supporting allegations that Epstein trafficked victims to additional named individuals. This memo, as you know, has since been scrutinized and was simply an effort to steer the public away from demanding full disclosure of the files. It did not work. Now, bearing that in mind, let's bounce over to this story. And it was also from last week, where it says he's fucking guilty. Trump, social media jumps says Trump walks out on press. The White House press room fell into visible tension on Wednesday after President Donald Trump ignored questions about newly released Jeffrey Epstein emails. The scene unfolded within seconds. A reporter shouted, "Mr. President, did you know about the girls Epstein mentioned in his emails?" Trump froze, his expression tightening. Cameras caught the silent stretch for several seconds before he abruptly turned his back and signaled to aides. The move triggered chaos in the room. Staffers immediately stepped forward, cutting off follow-up questions. One communications aide announced, "That's all for today," as Secret Service agents guided reporters towards the exit. Multiple journalists could be heard objecting, asking why the session was being ended so abruptly. Within minutes, clips of the moment spread online. And I should put my headphones back on because we might want to watch this. Let's go.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Mr. President, are you prepared to negotiate with Democrats now?
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you respond to these Epstein emails that were released today?
Well done, Mr. President. Great job.
So, everybody's getting hustled out. So, yeah. And it says here that Trump just ignored every single question about Jeffrey Epstein after the bill signing, and panicked White House staff tried to kick reporters out of the room. It's never been more obvious. I don't think that's necessarily true, but that I thought it was odd. But over the weekend, we did get a batch of emails from House Democrats in the Oversight Committee. Republicans also dropped 20,000 documents that I've kind of been picking through. There's a searchable database of them that I've been picking through looking for stuff. One of the emails talks about how Epstein had stuff to potentially end the Trump campaign, which was interesting. It also says that Epstein says that he was at Trump Tower in late 2016, just days after Donald Trump won his first presidential election. Those emails don't lie. Trump can tweet all he wants about hoaxes, but Trump can't dodge journalists forever. And the image is here. And it says, "Just had a great time," and then all the attendants, yes. And so, will you have a cabinet position? And so, yeah, it's a back and forth with someone named Linda Stone. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting series of connections, re-Trump, all of this, and so now this is all. So that was kind of the weekend, and the House is going to be voting to release the Epstein files, and so today we finally got word that Trump was prepared to. Here's the story about the 20,000. We got word today that Trump is going to be signing the bill to release the Epstein files in a sharp about face, because they've been trying to pressure Lauren Boebert to stop her support of it. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been out. Trump removed his support from Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's complaining about affordability and the Epstein files, and that the administration is not doing the stuff that she and other people voted for. This has all turned in mostly to an inter-party, Republican Party kind of crisis sort of thing. This isn't even being done by Democrats. This is happening within the Republican Party. And it also, so over the weekend, in addition to the messages and the dodging of questions, this then also happened. The mocking and accusatory voice of Jeffrey Epstein emerged from a trove of more than 20,000 emails made public by lawmakers on Wednesday, including his claim that President Trump once spent hours at my house with a young woman who later accused Mr. Epstein of sexually abusing and trafficking her when she was a teenager. In a series of emails with friends and associates, surfacing first in a few messages selected by House Democrats and then in full by Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, Mr. Epstein described Mr. Trump as a dirty businessman who was borderline insane, untrustworthy, and worse in real life and up close than the image he sought to portray to the public. Mr. Trump, White House officials, and administration allies dismissed the disclosures as the utterances of a discredited sexual predator who'd fallen out with Mr. Trump long before his crimes became publicly known. Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, called the emails a clear distraction. The president labeled them a hoax. Wednesday's document dump was the latest act in the rapidly unfolding political drama engulfing Speaker Mike Johnson and his Republican majority. They shuttered the House for the past 2 months in part to forestall a bipartisan effort to force a floor vote on a bill to force the Justice Department and FBI to release a separate set of documents, this one involving their investigation into Mr. Epstein and his longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. That vote is actually now going to happen, and Trump today has said he's going to sign it. So all of this could be coming to a thrilling conclusion. And there is there is a huge a kind of a huge, like I said, break in the Republican Party. As I said, the pressure campaign wraps up. Author Michael Wolff, who acted as an advisor to Mr. Epstein, said, "I believe Trump offers an ideal opportunity." Mr. Wolff wrote to Mr. Epstein in March of 2016, according to the emails, suggesting that becoming an anti-Trump voice gives you a certain political cover, which you decidedly don't have now. And it says here that the resolution was put to a vote on the floor this week. And they're trying to fast track it, and so a lot of information. This all happened kind of between Thursday, Friday, over the weekend, and now we're going to get a vote. We might actually get the Epstein files, maybe, kind of, sort of, possibly. Trump says he'll sign off on the release. Everyone's voting on it. I mean, we've been here before, okay? This might be real. This might be real. And all the more and more information that has come out, the more interesting it has been, and the kind of just the worst, honestly, to some degree, like, the worse it gets. Like, it just becomes so much more and so much more and so much more and so much more. Yeah. I'm not surprised. I think Trump has figured out he can't stop this. He's done everything he can to stop it. He's out of options, so he might as well get out in front of it. And I think that's what today's pivot was around. But notice how, just like that grift bubble, it's warping reality. It's a hoax. It's this, it's that. But now today, oh yeah, we're moving forward on that. Like, sometimes you gotta be patient with these people. But anyway, the big thing might be, this could be real. We could be getting the Epstein files by congressional vote here soon. It's going to implicate a lot of people. There's probably major national security implications of this. There could be global scandal with this. I've always maintained that that's probably why we haven't gotten the release before, is because it implicates too many people. There's a lot of people who will be shunned, fired, let go, killed because of their connections to this man. Certain clandestine operations of certain governments may be revealed. It's the scope of this can be huge. But we might actually get it this time. And the chips are going to fall where they may. And I think that's the conclusion Trump reached today. So, let's close out the show with some news on H-1B visas and how Trump has gotten in trouble with his party over immigration. And we're going to start with this lovely clip from Laura Ingraham. Let's listen.
visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration, because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
well, we
a
have
country
plenty of talented people
no, you
here.
don't. No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have. You don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put you.
How did we ever do it before?
Well,
I'll
give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea that made batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing. It's very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you and I disagree on this. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
And the post at the top is pretty telling, because it's like, wow, it's over, you know, and I mean, this is, yeah, I mean, the comment section kind of tells the story. He got voted in to end this crap, and yet he's pushing for it. Absolutely awful person. He's going to result in a country completely divided near the edge of real civil war, a further deteriorated economy, poorer Americans, lower wages, and a stronger push for communism. What I find interesting about this debate with the H-1B, and this also gets into this over here, the story over here, is how pervasive this has become in the Republican Party and how pissed off people are. We remember last, Christmas Eve, Vivek Ramaswamy was like, Americans are lazy and don't go to school, so we need outsiders. And we still, despite layoffs and a weakening job market, have tens of thousands of H-1B applications. And there's been different sort of people investigating this. There was a guy who put up a website of where they hide all the job postings. This person has released 200 pages of undeniable evidence, fully organized and sourced, documenting how a vast transnational labor cartel turned America's visa system into a human trafficking market. They forged resumes, falsified credentials, and sold visa sponsorships and green cards to the highest bidder. They were legitimized by Forbes, Inc. magazine, and handed hundreds of thousands in government contracts, rewarded with nearly $14 million in PPP refunds, and given unrestricted visa access while American workers were fired, blacklisted, replaced. Undeniable proof that the H-1B program didn't just fail, it became a weapon used against us. This isn't talent mobility. It's not immigration. It's organized labor trafficking disguised as tech consulting, a global racket selling people, selling visas, and selling out America. This wasn't a secret network. It was a business model hiding in plain sight. Regulators ignored it, corporations funded it, and law firms helped build it. And now WorldNet Daily is giving Americans a front row seat to the evidence exposing it all. And this is quite stark, kind of showing how this stuff moves through. And the reason why I kind of love this and enjoy this is the simple fact that, for better or for worse, this reinforces what I have always said about immigration and the H-1B program, which has been corrupt for 25 years. You will never solve immigration in this country until you get corporate America off of cheap labor. Like, that's it. That's the game. That's the entire game. Absolutely the entire game is cheap labor. Like, it's that's the whole point of this, is to keep labor costs low. And what's funny is, in these different comment sections, this person's a Trump supporter, but they're doing great work. In these comment sections, we've heard of the same thing that Trump is saying. We don't have the talent. We don't have the people. We have to bring it in. We can't, raise up and train Americans. The CEO of Ford came out and said, I have 5,000 six-figure auto mechanic jobs, no one to fill them. Well, what they don't tell you is that dealerships don't pay that great. That's why mechanics get their training there and then leave after 2 years. And I know that because I have a longtime friend of mine who worked at a dealership, and he doesn't do that anymore. It's like he works elsewhere. I also used to work in automotive myself, so I know and understand the business model. And we always had great quality guys at our shop because we paid hourly. We didn't pay flat rate per job, which is how most dealers work. Anyway, this is the narrative. This is the narrative. And the reality is, companies do not want to invest in people. They don't want to teach them. They don't want to train them. They don't want to do anything because that's expense. It's a friction. And this gets into my original essay that I wrote about capitalism and published in 2014. The goal of capitalism is a frictionless return, money without nothing. And the biggest cost in any business is human labor. And the H-1B program is how they cut that expense in a lot of different ways. And the tech industry has been terrible about that for decades. They make people contractors. They bring in visa, all this sort of thing. The reality is a lot of people get left out in the cold. Oh, there's jobs. Oh, there's opportunity. Yeah, for who? And people are mad. And I think the interesting thing about this is this issue with immigration and visas and everything, which I think is absolutely good, is not coming from Democrats. It's coming from the right. And this is going to chase Trump down almost as good as what Epstein's about to do. And I just think it's a fascinating thing. I would encourage you to go check out the newsletter at CameronJournal.substack.com or CameronJournal.com and read what I wrote about immigration, MAGA, and Epstein, and how all of it sort of blends together. In fact, maybe I'll just go grab that real fast because this week, the politics of division. It says here, there's an increasing dynamic where, for the first time, President Trump isn't commanding the loyalty that he once did. Republicans are looking at the midterms, which don't look good after last week's victories for Democrats, and 2028, and right now it's not looking too rosy. Trump is about to find out what the word lame duck means. I always said he only had about 2 years to be effective before politics would move on without him. It may have already started, based on the new fractures opening up right now. The only good news for Democrats is that the shutdown stuff has been shoved right off the front page, and that's probably a good thing. If you want to read more, head on over to CameronJournal.com. It's on the front page, or head over to CameronJournal.substack.com. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Trump is finding out the donor class Republican Party. They want their cheap labor, they want their visa workers, all this type of thing. The base wants good, decent, high-paying jobs, and I was thinking about this last night before I went to sleep. Then I'm gonna go because my voice is dying. Years ago, and I wish I had screenshotted it. In a YouTube comment section, someone said, here's what's gonna happen. The wage of the American worker is going to be reduced to the global median, which means it's going to be a lower standard of living for everyone so that American labor costs the same as the global median. And basically what's happening is we're being outcompeted. And every once in a while, that quote kind of pops back up in my brain. It's like we're basically being outcompeted. Especially when you look at Indians who are willing to pool their resources, buy a hotel, live 15, 20, 50 to a house, all this sort of thing. I mean, ultimately, in most times in history, a group of humans working together always beats a group of humans working on their own. Collective strength is a strength multiplier over individuals working on their own. This is why the phalanx was more effective, was effective in war. You always have this dynamic of when people are willing to work together, you end up with it being a strength multiplier. These collective societies, India, the Chinese, can come into our individual system and basically pick us apart one by one. Because while we're all trying to work together on our own, they're working together as a group, as a collective, taking power, all this sort of thing. And that makes things very difficult. And ultimately, it's all probably going to win. I think we're trying to compete against much cheaper labor, and we're probably going to lose one way or another. And that leads to a very dark economic future ahead for us all. So, On that cheery note, I will leave you. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Please catch me on all your favorite social media platforms at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can catch me on Facebook. Just look up my name, Cameron L. Cowan. My new book, America's Lost Generation, is out now. Please buy it everywhere fine books are sold, but especially my website, because I make more money if you buy it on my website. And I will see you all next week for the Cameron Journal Newshour. There was no interview today. I just got all the new interviews edited. I just got them uploaded today. It's been crazy with meetings. We're going to have new interviews this week until the end of the year, so please bear with me. But make sure to sign up for that newsletter so you get that on Saturday. And I will see you next week for this show on Monday, but I'll see you sooner on Wednesday for The Living Joke. All right, everyone. Have a good night now. Bye-bye.